We imagine reality to be colourful because we know life is not black and white. Colour illuminates the path by providing a map of consciousness through energising us so we can experience the unseen world and embody all of who we are becoming. Hello and welcome. It's lovely to be with you all again. My name is Kate and I am here today with my co-host Kath, and I'm delighted to be able to introduce to you Harold Becker. Now, I've known Harold for a number of years on and off, and we always have the most amazing conversations. So when Kath and I were deciding what we wanted to do on the podcast and bring to the podcast, Harold was top of my list because we speak the same language, but we come to it from very different places. So I'm really excited to find out more about Harold's take on unconditional love and find out more about the Love Foundation that he's been running for almost 25 years now, and what's going on in his world, particularly as I know he's just come off a really important day which I agree with him, actually, being as it's my birthday, where they basically celebrate love and have a global love day on the 1st of May. So without further ado, over to you, Harold, and welcome.
I appreciate being here, and I certainly am looking forward to this brilliant conversation of like-hearted individuals coming together and sharing all things love. So thank you for letting me come in and participate and play with you two today.
So unconditional love, it's a lofty subject, Harold. Where shall we start? Tell us more about where this journey started for you. Maybe we start there. Yeah.
In the beginning, there was light. No, wait, that's too far back. Let's come back forward a little bit more to this lifetime. Yes. So my background, I have an MBA, Master's in Business Administration, did all the good things, worked full-time, went to school full-time simultaneously, and looked at theory and looked at practice. And I think started to realize I was always beating to my own drum and didn't recognize it at first because I was trying to do everything right, but kind of realized at some point that I wasn't really happy. So that evoked an intention change in my life, which took me into a direction. I left the port 1 degree different than I started, and boy, am I way different from my original destination. So my career path was laid out, and that looked pretty obvious. And the life that I started to live around 89, 90 has taken me completely different spaces and places. And in that initial awakening, I started to go within. And by going within, I started to realize I have thoughts and feelings, things that were going on all the time, but I didn't really recognize them. So this shift from going from outside world to an inside world, I started to pay attention to my thinking. And I would just say as a footnote, I realized that in any one moment, I maybe had 50 thoughts, just to an arbitrary number. And I was probably
Only
aware
50.
of only 50, and moment, however long that moment was. But I had maybe awareness of 10 of those. So that meant 40 of those thoughts were driving my life, and I was aware of about 10 of them. So that was my initial awakening, that I started to realize I had choice in the way I think.
Yeah.
So this is leading to the answer to your question, but in the choice of understanding that I had thoughts and feelings, and that my thoughts and feelings were creating my reality, I started to realize that I could change the way I thought and also begin to change the way I feel about myself and about the world around me. So that led to a deeper exploration about life, the universe, and everything. Who am I really? And that eventually emerged a specific theme, is that this idea of love kept coming up in a variety of different ways. And love, as we have typically know it today, and even back then, it's just kind of almost become a throw-off word. We love our spouses, we love our careers, we love our kids, hopefully, we love our our pets and our world and our cars and our houses, and it lost a sense of real genuine meaning. I was also fortunate in my world that I was not brought up in a household of any specific religion or connotation, so I was given great freedom. And as I started to explore within, I started to think, well, I kind of need to know. I'm not associated to any one specific religion, so I should probably know about them. So I read a brilliant book that was The Religions of Man. It explained every major religion, every major master teacher that was a part of a religion, and then all the ancillary minor religions that kind of go along with that. And after reading this tome of a book, I put it down and I thought every single religion had a singular message of love.
Yes, yeah.
And I'm like, here's this book written 1,000 pages, and there was really only one subject that was love. And I think my very practical, pragmatic, business-oriented mind said, well, why aren't we focusing on love? If that's been the message for eons, then why? And I made it a conscious decision to begin to explore what love meant to me. That led me to think, well, there's got to be more to love. And then that led me to this, well, what about this unconditional love that, major master teachers and major philosophies, everything kind of centered around? And quite honestly, then and now, unconditional love is particularly en masse relegated to God, whatever that means to somebody, or dog, whatever that means to somebody. Interesting, the flip side, you can either be unconditionally loved by God or by a dog. And that made no sense to me.
Yeah.
So I thought, we've got to find a new way of understanding unconditional love. And in crafting my initial new life, taking these insights and awarenesses and starting to put pen to paper and developing the odd workshop and stuff, I sat down one day and I thought, I'm going to derive a contemporary definition for unconditional love, something that made sense to me. So I took the two words and separated them, and I took the word love, and I developed all the concepts that we typically associate to the word love, many of the ones I just mentioned. And then I thought, well, what is love really? It ultimately is a way of being. If you really go beyond all the limited versions of love, it really is a way of being. When we are in love, it is universal, infinite. We feel it, we know it, we understand it, and we can't prove it. We can't show it. It is just this way of being. When we come from love, we're just being ourselves. So I threw the first word, unconditional. Unconditional is being unlimited, without condition. So I thought unconditional love is an unlimited way of being. That made sense to me. Now, it's important to understand in this unlimited way of being, it is right now. This is another understanding that became very clear to me, is that this is the moment right now where we have our physical, emotional, mental, and spiritual selves all as one. And when we are connected wholly, and a deep breath often will bring us, because the deep physical breath will bring us into this moment. In this moment, unconditional love is an unlimited way of being. In this moment, unconditional love is an unlimited way of being. In this moment, unconditional love is an unlimited way. In other words, our past is a memory. It has no effect upon us other than what we give it. Our future is our imagination. It has no effect upon us other than what we feed it. This is the moment where life is happening. So in this moment, all possibilities exist. And when we can come fully into this moment and embrace the fact that all things are possible, and that we have choice in where our intention and where our thoughts and feelings go, we actually begin to create a completely different world for ourselves as a result. And that world that we begin to explore and begin to manifest is really something now that's coming from our heart rather than from our head. So the wisdom of the heart is we begin to pay attention to our intuition, we begin to pay attention to our dreams, our true hopes and desires, and we begin to come from a very authentic self moving forward. And that unfolding path is, for my personal experience, dramatically, expansively, exponentially different than anything I could have possibly have imagined when I was doing everything right but wasn't happy.
Oh
So
God.
did that answer your question?
There's so much there to unfold, isn't there? To basically explore. And yeah, it does. It's a fabulous answer. But for our audience, they're probably going to go, "What?" So, and when we look at like those stages that unfolded, I mean, we don't just get to this way of being, right? So we go inside. That was the first thing I was hearing. There are a number of conditions that you're talking about there. So for instance, like going inside, did you have a tool to get there?
I will say now, in hindsight, more understanding is there than could possibly be understood at the time that it's happening. It is an inner awakening. And in my particular instance, there wasn't a profound out of body, there wasn't a near death, there wasn't a wow vision moment. It was a very steady unfolding, but it is something that started within because I started to ask bigger questions about myself. And I think that is probably a great beginning place, is to recognize choice. And this is kind of foundational. I wrote about in my first book.
Yeah.
That choice is really something that most of humanity doesn't realize they have, because they are following so much of either the ancestral lineage, lifetime after lifetime, generation after generation, or they're following their corporate whatever focus and vision is, or they're following their religious, or in fact, it's a combination of all of these things going on all the time. Not to mention, following media and any kind of resource that, kind of conveys whatever image, that they want to convey. So realizing that we have choice is a fundamental beginning point, and allowing ourselves to explore our own inner potential so that it can unfold without perhaps closing the door before it has a chance to become something more of an understanding that we can actually grasp. So this is the cliches throughout eons have been, we want to listen to that still small voice within. We want to listen to our own inner resonance. We have the answers. Well, for most people, it is a sifting and sorting to begin with, because you have to sift out what is my particular perspective on something versus all the noise of everything we've accumulated and brought into our world. So it is an unlimited way of being, is the beginning part of saying, I love myself enough to give myself this gift to explore life for me, and then move forward and let this unfolding happen more naturally and gracefully, as opposed to trying to analyze. I can attest to this. Overanalyzing every little nitpicky thing is a waste of time. So if I can help any of the audience that says, we don't need to overanalyze this. We just need to sit with it and notice it, and then make direct choices. Maybe, take our power back, take our personal sovereignty back, and realize that we have the right to be happy. In fact, it is our natural state. Love is our natural state.
Yeah.
And then when we are happy and in love, we are then the most powerful energy on the planet that evokes real and genuine and lasting change.
See, I love how, when I think of the word knowledge and I think of the word knowing, how they both start with, KNOW, but they're worlds apart, right? And I love what you're saying there about, you have to start thinking or asking yourself bigger questions, because that takes you to another level of consciousness, which then enables you to get away from the knowledge to seek the wisdom of the body. Yes, because there's where the answers are, truly in the knowing space of the felt sense, which is, I think, what you're alluding to, aren't you, with the heart and how we open to that expansive nature.
Well, if we go to the very fundamental, and this is, I love bringing up some perspectives that kind of blow away the paradigms that we kind of live under that are not necessarily evoking the greatest understanding. And one of it is that we come into this world alone, filled with help and guidance. But we are really coming into this world in our own unique way, with our own set of parameters, and then we absorb everything around us. Well, we leave this planet very much in a similar way. It's a singular journey. So one of the things I suggest right up front for all people is become your own best friend, because you're going to live with yourself your entire life. your thoughts and feelings are yours alone, and not all of those are yours personally so much as accumulated and attracted and attached to. So become your own best friend. Be the best friend to yourself. That kind of limits the self-critic. It kind of dissolves some of those critical aspects of ourselves that limit ourselves, and we start to explore our potentials. And when we do that and we become our own best friend, then we have ourselves to go to, because in fact, we have a tendency to think that everything is happening outside of ourselves, and we are typically en masse reacting to outer conditions, when in fact, we are the point of power through our thoughts and feelings, realizing that my thoughts and my feelings create my reality. Right now, as we're sharing this, each one of us are in a room. Well, before that room was a room, it was a series of resources, plywoods and plasterboards and all kinds of things. And before it was that, it was trees and stone and rock and all that. But in order for this room that we sit upon, or this chair that we sit upon, for all that to gather together, it originated as an idea from someone, perhaps a blueprint as it came into a house or a building, perhaps maybe even a blueprint or a plan for a chair, whatever. But it's really the idea that put the form into motion that eventually manifested into reality. Well, I liken it, one of my great examples is when I started out with schooling, postgraduate school, college. I thought, well, how do you get through a 2-year degree, 4-year degree, 6-year degree? Well, it was the idea of seeing myself completing it and graduating. So I had to take my thought that I wanted to do this, and then I had to persevere over 2, 4, 6 years to get to the point where I actually graduated. Well, some things take that long. Other things, like if I have the idea of a loaf of bread, I can go down to the grocer's and pick up a loaf of bread. The same mechanism is always working. Our thoughts and feelings creating our reality. So it becomes vitally important to become aware of, where is that originating thought coming from? Is it fear-based, limitation-based? Is it heart-based? Is it love-based? Is it bringing me happiness and joy, or is it bringing me drudgery and routine? And because we are building upon a lot of momentums, everyone's got a level of momentum, it becomes imperative that we become aware of our own selves. Another aspect to this becoming our own best friend is we have a tendency to think that, say, if I were to touch either one of you or touch another, we feel this sensation.
Yeah.
Well, we have a tendency to say, oh, we're feeling the other person, when in fact we're feeling nothing. We are feeling ourselves, we're feeling our own nerve endings interpreted by the brain to say that there's something solid there. So the fact that we actually think, say, in anything that we're involved with, sexually, emotionally, physiologically, mentally, whatever we're doing, we're actually having an interpretive experience. In fact, when we get down on a subcellular level, there's so much space in between the molecules and the atoms and the electrons and protons. There is such vastness. I heard once or read once that if you took all the mass of our body, it'd be smaller than a thimble, because we're there, So it's breaking apart this paradigm that thinks that all these things that are happening to us, it's really us having the interpretation. So you become very aware of your physiology, your physicalness. You become very aware of your emotional entity. Then emotions, strange, vague area, because a lot of people have emotions and they relate that to the love. But in fact, maybe we can explore this a little deeper, that emotions are really the way we feel about life. And there's a distinct difference between a happy thought and a fearful thought. And then we have our mental capacity, again, here directly to your knowledge and knowing, worlds apart, same basis. And yet when you have a knowing, well, we're really talking about trusting ourselves and trusting our own inner wisdom and listening to and evoking and becoming our own potential pathway. And then we have, just shall we say, and I loosely throw out the idea of spiritual wholeness, which is really our collective multi-dimensional electromagnetic being upon this planet. We are so much more than we possibly can conceive of right now, because we have such limited awareness of even our physiology. There's so much more going on. I mean, right now, as we're speaking, there are trillions of cells doing trillions of things. Yeah. We are not controlling any of it. We're not doing any of it. And yet air expanding, coming into my body, coming back out through my mouth and my throat, it's actually coming out into the world. It's just air passing various bodily functions, but in fact, being interpreted in the brains of the listeners as words that may or may not make any sense to them. So, there's this whole dynamic. We've got so much going on. There's so much richness. And I think that's probably where all this kind of really fell into me in a great awareness, is there is so much more than what we currently understand about ourselves, life, the universe, and everything. And any time that we see or connect to something, we are just having a sliver of a perspective from the greater whole. In fact, if we looked on the other side of it, we'd have a completely different perspective. Or if we looked at a more holistic way of it, we would have a completely different perspective. So I've kind of come to understand I want to be in this physical body having a human experience while simultaneously being an observer of the bigger picture. So I can be in this world and not of it, and be in this world and be more fully present because I'm not of it. Sounds like a conundrum, but it really does make sense when you start to live it. This is part of what has happened over, many years of just exploring life, the universe, and everything, because I asked a simple question way back when: do I want to be happy?
Yeah, the great paradox of the human condition, right?
Exactly.
Okay.
So I suppose there's lots of things coming up for me there, and one of them was, I don't think there's anyone who would ever say they don't want to be happy, but they don't necessarily know or haven't experienced all that you've just unpacked for us there. And then another thought in my head is that happiness really is an ephemeral kind of thought. It's not, it's not something you can hold on to. And as soon as we hold on to it or go, well, that makes me happy, so I'll do more of that, it becomes mundane, or, you get used to it. So you think, well, it doesn't have the same capacity for joy. And so I think that's part of the issue, maybe why, for me, I like color, because when we start getting into language, it can trip us up and we get stuck in a place. So I was going to that place, and then also thinking, as I know you've written a number of books over the years, and I was intrigued when we were looking at what you'd written. And the first book that you wrote was The Seven Doorways to Self-Discovery. And I wondered, and I think we both did really, obviously there are 7 chakras. Is it linked to the chakras, or is it something just happens to be 7? But that was because, again, if you bring in the chakras, I mean, as we know, it's a Sanskrit word, and it's talking about the energy wheels in our bodies, but that brings in another way in and comes back, I suppose, to where you started some time ago, Kath, when you were saying about tools and ways in.
Well, I will say that you're right with the 7s, and you will find a little unknown secret that all of my books do contain 7s. And I can explain that it wasn't intentional for the chakra system, although very aware of the chakra system and the color system. In my exploration, because I allowed myself to, and I continue to allow myself to look at all things with an open-minded essence. I also looked at very esoteric teachings that are timeless, been around for a very long time. And one of those understandings were the 7 rays. And we are actually in a time period where we're moving from the Aquarian age to the Piscean age, if you use the astrological calendar, but we're actually moving from what is known as a 6th ray to a 7th ray. And they don't always move chronologically, but 6th ray would be, not surprising, a 2,000-year Aquarian age of traditions, of routines, of foundations. 7th ray is a very different ray of very open-endedness. It's a recognition of the spontaneousness of creation. I very much identified with this understanding because I feel incredibly, especially over the years, very detached from my creations. I can walk away from them at any time. I enjoy them when I have them, and there's maybe a temporal attachment to them, but I feel very strongly about, like, from the very beginning, and this will relate, and perhaps why I don't always have immediate color for you, is that I'm the kind of person that wants to know, how can I create a color of the crayon box of Crayola that has never existed before upon the planet? So how do you do that? How do you create, if, we have 64, we have 120, I don't know what the well, now with computers, the ultimate, color spectrum is, but I'm curious about what kind of color has never been on the planet before, because that would be really intriguing to me. How can we bring about a color that we as a planet and as a humanity has never perceived before? So the seventh ray is kind of my nod to recognizing this. The traditions got us to this point, but true creativity is coming from the heart. And that is something that most people have not been able to explore because they really have not allowed themselves to look beyond what is, go within and say what can be.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that, because I was thinking when you were talking about how color really, for me, changed my life and my world, because it really opened up my creative resourcefulness. And I found that I was writing and creating things that I could never have imagined was possible. And of course, with Kate too, we were collaborating and just bringing some new tools and techniques into fruition that were just, it was a gift. It felt like a gift. It felt like it was, it had its time, it was ready to come through. And even then we were saying, back in 2014, even 13, 14, 15, with the work that we were doing, we were ahead, it was ahead of its time. And so trying to get some of these concepts into organizations and help them to understand at that deeper level, was fascinating, because
You're preaching to the choir, because I think one of my very first workshops I gave in Washington, D.C., and it was a lovely 8-hour experience. And the group that had participated in at the very end, one of the gentlemen asked, the people's perspectives. And one was very kind. He said, "I loved everything I experienced." This was 1991. But don't give up your day job. I think, oh, that train done left. I gave it up a year ago. But Kathy, make a very interesting point, because I too never, maybe I would graciously consider myself a good B student, but, based on my English, my writing achievements and everything, nowhere would I have ever been a writer. Absolutely would not have been a writer. Never considered that as, a possibility. Well, as I left this new place of exploration, one of the first things that came up is during workshop, should I have a book to go to the workshop? And I just sat down one day. Well, I wrote a book in 6 weeks. Never had written anything like that in my life. And all I really did is I came from my own personal perspectives. I listened to myself and I thought, what have I learned? In fact, everything that I share, I feel like it is my responsibility and necessarily my desire to know firsthand what I'm writing about. So I never genuinely quote anybody else. I'm like, this is how I perceive life, and it's unique for me, and this is what I'm sharing. I can say that I've worked myself through this, so I can say that I recognize that this has worked for me, whether it works for anybody else. Well, that's kind of how I approached my writing scene from my very first book. And, to this day, my original publisher still finds, we're still friends, and we still find this great recognition that he is a very strong publisher of words, and very much, finds, he wants the best quality words. He still thinks that my writing that I was doing in 91, which was just a year out of my business world, is still as timeless today as when I wrote it. And he still, applauds that. I find that just very interesting. If I would have at any step of the way said, I can't do this because of bogus reasons, I would have never done it. And I think that's what your work, our work, a real essence of what we're here to convey is there are endless possibilities. Don't kill them before they have a chance to blossom. You nurture them. Let them explore the boundaries and then go beyond them. Try new things, because in that trying of new things, there's such a beauty of potential creativity. I'm looking forward to 8 billion plus on the planet right now. There's so much potential that we have not even conceived of. And when people become to be more aware of themselves, self-aware, and come from that space, and we come from a collaborative space versus a competitive space, we just don't really have an inkling as to the potential of what's yet to come upon this planet.
Yeah.
I think that's really interesting because it kind of takes me back to what you were saying a little while ago about that we're moving into the territory of the seventh ray. Um, because I'm a fan of the seven rays that, and I've studied them to some degree. And when I was looking at them recently, it was in relation to psychosynthesis, which is a form of, transpersonal psychology in a way. And in the and it was interesting because I couldn't understand, because in other things that I'd looked at, that they associate colours with the seven rays. They'd associated different colours, and in this particular book, they associated it with a brown colour, and I thought that's a really odd colour to choose. And in our system, we have copper, and it's there are various sets of bottles, and the last set are the sort of higher vibrational bottles, and they start with the copper gyres. And often people that are in that metaphysical plane don't really like them because they bring them back down to earth. They don't necessarily come to earth. And what's interesting is, to make copper, you need equal amounts of red, blue, and yellow, the three primary colours. And so when I was reflecting on it, I thought, of course, that's why they've made it this very dull colour, because there's something very strong, that in some places they talk about those on the seventh ray as the magicians on the planet. And the term I quite like is the conductor, because they bring in everyone and they can be with anyone, whatever their vibration, because they are, more than any other, people coming of the other rays, they absolutely see the potential in each of the people in front of them, and see where they connect with it, where we know we're all connected. But it's a particular gift, I think, of the seventh ray, which is why they can conduct the orchestra. And it's what we really need, I think, in the world right now, is that ability to bridge and do the both and to be able to sit in the space in between, in the paradox, really.
And the rays also, and as you go up the chakras, the color of the chakras would be blue, indigo, and violet. If you were to open up a closet door, the whole spread is blue, indigo, and violet. I mean, that has been my color choice. For most of this time, I'm just naturally attracted to those higher colors. And we have been, when we reprinted the subsequent books, we're very keen on using these colors for the covers, because the very original book the publishing house had a graphic artist do it, and it had unusual colors of kind of yellows and greens and blues, but it was not what I expected. So when we had the opportunity some years later to redo them, I was very much keen on bringing the jewel tones and kind of representing the color system in the cover of the book, because I think it kind of lent to what was inside it. So color has always been a strong part of my recognition. In fact, when you look at the Global Update, for example, the original logo actually came from a lady who at the time was living in the UK. We started Global Update for May 1st back in 2004. And she, as we were just, this was a time period where you just broadcast. We never saw ourselves grassroots, so we're never local. We just went out to the world. And we had a lot of responses from the African nations. We had responses from the UK, and this one lady sent us this logo, said Global Update. And it's a very simple logo. It's kind of a rainbow set of colors, kind of muted, but if you see it, it's recognizable. It's universal. And we have chosen to keep that logo as, even though it is not the most graphically, artistically perfect logo, it really kind of exemplifies the essence of Global Update. And so we've chosen to keep that. When we came up with the original logo for the Love Foundation as the nonprofit, we were very keen on a very specific conveyance. And the conveyance is that logo is actually a picture of the sun in the midday and clear blue sky, something that we actually took. So we used the blue of the sky with the actual sun coming through, and that's our logo. And then we imprint the Love Foundation on top of that. So there's a living representation of what we kind of consider the Love Foundation is really this beam of light, this ray of light, the sun being kind of the universal ray of light with all the colors enmeshed, the white light as we would see it being all the colors enmeshed together. So color has always been a prominent part of our recognition. And then going back to the rays, looking at the indigo, I've never actually heard of it being with the darker tones of the copper, but actually it makes sense. We're moving from very different. Copper almost at that point becomes in its shiniest state, a very reflective surface and really quite beautiful in its own right, not unlike silver and gold at that point. And so it's very interesting that the ray part certainly plays into, but it's back to then again the grounding, the exploration, as you said, the magician, the seventh ray part. I kind of often thought, well, I have a really old style name. Harold isn't something that you necessarily, now you don't give your kids today. But I thought about, well, the name is vibrational. I thought, well, I often hark the herald angel sings. Some people call that my theme song, but it's the heralding in of the new age. And then my last name being Becker, I often think of it heralding in or beckoning in, encouraging people to come into themselves, because there's such a vast richness within ourselves that we unfortunately have been kind of molded and taught to believe that we need to look a certain way, behave a certain way, perform a certain way, yada, yada, yada. And in fact, when you explore, if you explore me back in the 80s, perfect blue pinstripe suit, red tie, white shirt, crisp to the nines. And when I embarked on this new journey, it shed to khakis and a polo Oxford. As I continue to grow, it shed from that to, I live in Florida, it's usually shorts and a t-shirt. But in essence, I allowed color into my world. I allowed color into my world, and I'm known for that. I mean, people, they expect to see me in, color, and I just think that for me, I don't do it for any purpose other than it brings me joy. I wear what I wear because I feel that, I have to try it on and it has to feel that it matches my vibration from day to day.
Yeah, I think you're just living it, aren't you, Harold? You're living your beingness, which is kind of what whilst the whole book, Colourful Boardrooms, was about helping people understand these different leadership levels, which is as much about what they do and emulated through the way they be. It's really modeling, that shift in behavior, isn't it? Of a leader for us, Kate, that actually shifts everything in the collective. Yeah. And so I love what you're saying about this, the potential for all of us to lift our level of self-awareness changes what we're seeing in our collective environment. So thinking about, and I mean, obviously, I'd love to continue this conversation because I think there's so much. We're going to have to get you back, I think, maybe like series 3 or something, and we can talk more. But we always ask our guests this. I mean, life is full of ordinary moments, but what about is there any extraordinary moments for you that any standout moments of this magical journey called life on the trajectory of the love message that you want to share with our audience?
I think every day has its extraordinary moments. It has to be an open perspective, an open perception. And the reality is that we make out of each moment what we want to make out of it. And if we react in a lower vibrational way, that's very much what it becomes. And if we act in a very open-ended way, that's what it becomes. There have been countless moments interacting with individuals one-on-one. I think the most precious, priceless one is when I interact with someone and in the conversation, they have a lifetime realization, an awakening, an aha moment that is uniquely into them. They can't ever describe how it happened. It was the proximity of the right question at the right time. And it is something that happens within. But when you actually watch that energy literally unfold, and it's an invisible energy that you can totally perceive. And when you're actually engaging in it, and you watch that moment where it goes from one-dimensional understanding to a multidimensional understanding, it's breathtaking. And no part could you relate it, put words to it. Could you even ask later what it meant to the individual? And I will say historically, and I think you'll both recognize this, there are times when these epiphanal wake-up moments happen, and there's now a recognition that, oh, their life is going to change. And it's quite possible a week from now, they're loving, they're blubbering, they're completely into the moment, but a week from now, their life is going to change rather dramatically because their dimensional attraction state just changed. And it's kind of like I metaphorically say, it's like if an alcoholic gives up drink, they stop going to the bar, they stop going to the liquor store, they stop hanging out with people that drink. Well, the people that for former buddies that drank with them, they're not going to like it. So they're going to kind of move out. The routes we take to various places are going to change. And then the big people we begin to interact with are going to be different than what we've been accustomed to. It's not unlike moving from one house to the next. There's a moment of chaos between the two. So epiphanal moments often bring chaotic moments in our lives because one begets the other. And then what really happens is you start living on a more authentic life on a deeper level. The question that is asked, and I will ask it here, is perhaps an open-ended question. I'll ask it to each of you. Do you love yourself unconditionally?
Nice question.
That's the simple question.
Nice question. It's been a life practice, Harold. And I think at 57 next, I can say that I am coming back round to that place of maybe when I came in and I was innocent and in love with that world around me and that sense of who I be. So, yeah, I mean, absolutely. I understand and live by that best friend mentality. And that's been the biggest gift of the spiritual path for me, and opening up to this way of understanding, to be gentle with myself, to love myself in this unconditional way. And in that regard, it's kind of ironic, isn't it? We don't look for love because we are love, and then we get the love.
Mm-hmm.
So that was a yes, I take it.
It was a firm yes.
Not to put you on the spot, Kate.
No, I'm happy to answer. I was just starting when you asked me. I think for me, it's like a journey. So I totally. There are moments where I can feel that really, really strongly. And then there are other times when lots of things are coming in and I'm like, oh, that's interesting. Because I think the way life, or my understanding of life at the moment is, and I think I said this in one of the previous episodes, but it's a bit like an elastic band, which is sort of like and if you twist the elastic band, you get an 8, if you know what I mean. So you've got the top circle and the bottom circle. And interestingly, we're in an 8 year. And we're probably the bit of consciousness in the middle of the 8. And so we want to expand upwards, because who wouldn't want to be in an expansive, place full of light? And at the same time, if we all lived in if I lived in a cave, then I could talk, my stuff about spiritual, this, that, and the other, and it would sound amazing. And I get to see the reality of it through the interactions that I have with people, and then what's coming up, what is there that maybe I haven't fully accepted in myself yet that needs tending to. And so it's that kind of, I think that in the Sufi tradition, they talk about the nafs, and it's sort of just releasing those last little pieces of ego, or it's like layers of the onion. So you think, oh yeah, because Kath and I have collaborated for years and we've had our moments, and it's a really easy space for me to be in because we've been in it on and off for a long time. And so when there are other people, then it's like, oh, there's a new way here, there's other things to be aware of. And so it's kind of a journey. And then sometimes it's everything is very much in flow. And then other times it's like, oh, there needs to be a bit more space here or what have you. I think what I would say is what I notice is when things are out of alignment, I notice it much more quickly now as I go, oh, there's something not feeling right energetically. What is this? And I need to go and reflect on it. And I might bounce an idea off with, a mentor or something like that. But ultimately, I have to come back to that place because, and it's interesting, I'm going to be leading a retreat on abundance. And so people have a perspective on what that is. And often they relate it to the New Age concept or money. And I think it's actually something a bit different, which is really the balance between giving and taking. And actually, in every relationship we're in, there's a balance of give and take, or you could say giving and receiving. And it's, are we at that midpoint? And it was really interesting because this week I've received a lot of love, people saying, oh, because of my birthday. And then sometimes if in one case, one of my friends, I'll share this story because I like stories because it makes it more concrete for people. A friend of mine couldn't come to these drinks that I was having, but she said she offered to make me a cake, even though she wasn't coming, which was really lovely because I wasn't going to have cake because I wasn't too bothered. But she was really, really, I think she had a 13-hour day of work. She works for herself, and yet she found time to make me a cake and deliver it to the house, which was really touching. She also gave me a couple of gifts and a card, which was lovely and totally unexpected. And then because she couldn't come, she insisted on taking me out for lunch the next day, which was amazing. But I felt almost overwhelmed at the amount of generosity and giving that was coming my way. And so it's in every moment. Do you see what I mean? As you said, that every moment we have a choice about how we be, but also what's coming in and how that, what our system is feeling and how what it's saying about that, So I think it's not an unqualified yes, but because I think it's more complex than that. And I think for me, the journey of life is really about deprogramming all of the rhubarb that got put in when we were at that sort of very influential age, and so it's like the things go into the software or to the programming, but it's not the truth of it. It's not the truth of who we are. And so it's releasing that and releasing and to another level and another level. And I think that's the work, really.
So that's a maybe, huh?
No, I'm saying it's yes and.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
And.
So let me pull it back into something I mentioned earlier. The only moment we have is right now. So if there was ever a moment to choose to love ourselves unconditionally, when would that moment be? And therefore, and you make a really good point, and this is something that people don't always understand with the evolution of this question, especially if it's relatively new to them, or let's face it, and usually unless I ask it, nobody's ever heard the question in their life. But once I ask it, you can't unask it, so now it's there.
Yes.
But to recognize that if I were ever going to love myself unconditionally, just truly everything I am, the good, the bad, and everything in between, whatever we perceive of ourselves, when would be the best moment? Well, it can only be right now. It's not something people often say, well, I'm working on it, I'll get there. And I'll say, well, okay, we're going to ask this question next Tuesday at lunchtime. Well, are you going to be prepared between now and then to find every last bastion of whatever? And I'm using this as an opportunity to kind of explore this bigger understanding, is that when you get to lunch next Tuesday, if you've diligently worked on loving yourself, to the best of your ability, it's still going to be now. Next Tuesday at lunch is now. Yeah. So, and the reality, and you actually are sharing it in the same way, is to recognize that I love myself unconditionally doesn't mean that I'm not only in the center of that 8 or that Mobius curve, I'm both sides. In other words, it's all happening within. Everything's happening within. What we perceive is us. So if I were to ever be that best friend, if I were going to ever love myself unconditionally, now would be the time to claim it, choose it, be it. And to your point, naturally, necessarily, we're still in a world of contrast. We're still in an earthly 3D reality. We're still going to find moments where all those little bastions of conditions are going to rear themselves and say, oh, do you really? And each time, and this is to me what has made a difference, is each time that happens, I have a baseline to go to. I know I love myself unconditionally. So I have a place where I've already chosen it. It is my baseline, it is my foundation. And then however many moments it takes to return to that place. And I will say, in earlier years, something could niggle me for months and it would take that long before it would come to a sense of peace. Many, many, many things now are nearly spontaneous as a result of recognizing this love. So we're both saying the same thing, is that yes, we do love ourselves unconditionally. It is a profound and simple question to ask ourselves. And we're giving ourselves the gift to recognize that it's not about, ooh, I just love myself unconditionally. Now I'm making all these mistakes. Or now I love myself unconditionally. Now I feel like I loathe myself looking in the mirror. Or I just ate that whole cake all by myself and I don't feel good. It creates a whole different place to come back to.
Yeah.
In other words, this is the best question I feel we can ask ourselves. Do I love myself unconditionally? Now, we might have to ask that question many more times to continue to integrate it. But that initial one is, and I think this is where, I feel humanity would benefit immensely by just realizing, oh, I do love myself unconditionally. It doesn't matter what I've done. Trust me, we've worked with all kinds of individuals and, people out of prison, people not even in prison, they tell me things that I shouldn't know about their lives, but there's no condition, there's no judgment. And I think that's what we then convey from the unconditional perspective, is that anyone can come to us and share anything, and we will have zero judgment about their choice because we recognize zero judgment about our choice or choices. So I loved asking both of you the question. I appreciate the candid and direct responses. It is an unusual question. It's kind of a signature question that I love to share because it does pose that kind of major, massive self-recognition, self-awareness, self-understanding. And it paves the way to become our own best friend and to become good with ourselves. What happens naturally is then everything we look at in the outer world takes on a different perspective. And some will say, oh, you got rose-colored glasses. No, I see the soul of everybody. As to your point, yes, people can get very uncomfortable around me because I do see their potential and they don't always see their potential. And I have a tendency to invoke it. And that doesn't always make people comfortable. But it is something that I so relish for me because I'm so glad that I have explored me, because in relationship to me now, I actually have a global presence with which I work with. And I get to every day interact with people from all around the world who have come to similar realizations without any of the Western-centric, American-centric, UK-centric experiences that perhaps we've had. You have somebody that, in Zimbabwe that has this very similar unity, love orientation. And by the nature of our organization, we've been able to connect, synchronistically connect, the right time, right space, we come together and we have kindredness. And many of the individuals that are having these awarenesses are living in nations and cultures that are far more counterproductive to the understanding than anything we could fathom. And yet there they are as a beacon of light. And that's, if you say moments, it's very difficult to attest to a moment, because my life became the moment when I decided to let go of what I was and allowed myself to become more. And that more is always becoming. Absolutely. The truth is always expanding. There's not a definitive. The love is always expanding. And we come from a baseline of unconditional, then the experiences become unconditional and they become unlimited. And that's where it really comes full circle.
So as we come to the top of the hour, Harold, I'm just, firstly, where can our audience find you?
Well, I asked us one question first. What color emerged I'm very curious from both of you. Did a color emerge in this conversation, or is it ongoing?
Oh, okay. Okay.
I put
Well, I was thinking
I,
about that, Kath. So I don't know
yeah,
what you thought, but I know I had a
I
very.
have a rose pink gold number going on here.
Mm,
Because I'm thinking that actually really Harold is espousing divine love, divine knowledge and understanding, but it's that, that lovely rose pink because it's softened, it's that absolutely living it, being it, and the gold, the authenticity of
Yeah.
like we can just be ourselves and actually let go, and the futuristic quality of the pale gold as opposed to the gold. That's where I was going. How about you?
Well, the thing that stood out for me actually was when you were talking about colours yourself, Harold, and you said how you like blue, indigo, and violet, and that's what most of your wardrobe is. And what strikes me about you each time we meet is that you're a real communicator, and we associate that with blue. So that's the first thing. And obviously there's the sort of spiritual understanding that comes in violet to a degree. Not that that's violet has other connotations, is what I meant by the to the degree piece. And then really for me, I kept getting indigo. And that's because people that are indigo are often misunderstood in the world because they kind of vibe at a different vibe to everyone else, but also because in a way they can see not necessarily the potential but the future or how things could go. There's a very strong connection with intuition in indigo, and so there's
And it's a complementary to gold.
yeah, there's a kind of, I wouldn't say restlessness exactly, but that kind, well, I'm not going to just settle because there's always more. But
Well, it's the vision, isn't it? It's
and the
having the
vision
expansive vision
yeah,
for a future that could be better. Well, and what's better, and you're actually
exactly.
beginning to define that and get people to understand that, coming back to this now moment.
And I was thinking, because in our book we have a parable in indigo, which is the story of the three men. So somebody's coming along and he notices these three workmen. He says to the first one, "What are you doing?" And the guy goes, "Oh, I'm just laying bricks here." And I said, "Okay." And he goes to the second one, "What are you doing?" "Oh, well, this is how I earn my money." Moves to the third one, "What are you doing?" He goes, "I am making a building, a cathedral that's going to stand here for eons and for the rest of time and be a place of peace where people can come, and my children and my grandchildren and it will all be here." So that's very much an example of indigo consciousness, that ability to see all of what's there even before it's actually there.
And interesting, both of you sharing the threefold flame, which is another esoteric concept, which is the spark within each of our hearts would be the rose gold, the blue tones in either side, and then the white flame in the center, or whitish gold flame in the center, which would be the threefold flame, which is the fleur de lis in France, which would also connect with the Saint Germain energies, which would also connect to the seventh ray energies. Interesting, very interesting. So yes, and yes, because we are a composite of all of it. And it's interesting that you both picked up on the two aspects of the threefold flame. So yeah, I'm very glad I asked the question. So clearly the color is prominent for all of us, and color being a vibration and actually a sound. It's interesting. A lot of people don't associate color as actually having a vibrational tone, a beautiful song. And I think one of the things that we've come to realize is, as you mentioned, the figure eight, the Mobius curve, the center point. Yes, the balance really in the center point, but it really represents infinity. It also represents the two halves, the upper and the lower. And I think many people want to be spiritually perfect when in reality we are the totality. We are all of it. And if we embrace all of it, that's when we find the richness, because we want to hold ourselves to the highest vibrations possible while unfolding and infusing all of them, because that's how we recognize our groundedness in humanity. We're not just spiritual beings. We're having a human experience. Have a human experience. Indulge. You'll find your way through it, but do it consciously as an observer, and it becomes completely different. So this has been a wonderful conversation of three hearts coming together, something that I absolutely treasure. These are the moments that I live for. These are the moments that make me really understand how well things are going on the planet, because there's very little awareness given to our potentials and a whole lot of awareness given to the very minuscule amounts of negativity. But that's where the focus is. And here we are showing that we are quite capable of making a very different world just by being ourselves.
Well, it's been an absolute pleasure, Harold. And so as I bring this episode to a close, I want to say this. You are somebody who clearly models a 100% that unlimited way of being for all of us. And so thank you so much for giving your time, your energy, excuse me, your inspiration and your wisdom for all of us. And I want to just recall what you said, which is the past is memory, the future is imagination, and all we have is the now. So get out there, and if you're not, start asking yourself, are you loving yourself unconditionally? Bye for now.
Magic happens in any given moment. All it takes is us to be aware and present and open to what wants to unfold. Our intention is always to enable you to see more, perceive more, and be more.